let's have a look what's in the papers today. Joining me now is the Spectator columnist and former member of the European Parliament, Patrick O'Flynn. Let's have a little run through of the papers first. So, Patrick, you've picked out the Sunday Times front page as perhaps the most predominant story this morning.
Well, yes, in old-fashioned newspaper man parlance, they've got something of a marmalade dropper, something that kind of arrests the attention of the average person over breakfast, I would suggest, which is Hamas Chief lives in British council house. So the sort of story that's really got everything and represents multiple failings by the British state. First of all, that this guy, Mohammed Qasem Sawalha, got to Britain, then was able to get British citizenship, able to get a council house, even able to buy the council house under the old discount scheme, saving over £100,000. And to top it all off, the house he's got is smack in the middle of the London borough of Barnet, which is the borough where 1 in 5 British Jews lives. So it's a really multiple shocking failure and underlines, I think, great public unease about our controls on exactly who comes to our country, whether they have our country's interests at heart, and also whether they're able to access public resources and welfare resources. I know that, for instance, the government minister Neil O'Brien recently put out a set. He said that 48% of the entire London council housing stock is now occupied by foreign-born tenants, which is quite astonishing. In general, I think that will cause immense resentment among British taxpayers. But for us actually to have an enemy of the West, arguably of Britain itself, obviously, and somebody who was quite a senior player in Hamas. This isn't just a foot soldier, as it were. This is someone who's represented the group in trips to see Vladimir Putin, that sat on its so-called Politburo. This is one of the main guys, and to have him sort of sail through like this for a large number of years make people think, has this country either got a handle on its own security or any sense of decency about supporting its own citizens and keeping them safe?
It's absolutely extraordinary, because no doubt anyone sitting around the cabinet table would say this is a disgrace and shouldn't have happened.
Yes.
And of course you point to Neil O'Brien, the government minister, saying, isn't it a disgrace that 48% of council housing is going to foreign-born nationals? Yet these are the people in charge.
Yes, absolutely.
You'd think that they would have a handle on this.
You would. There's something going wrong, isn't there, between the political leadership of the country. There's no transmission mechanism down to ideas and policies and priorities being actually driven through on the ground. Something's gone badly wrong, and whether the Tories have just taken their eye off the ball, whether there's been too much high-pressure stuff going on for them to concentrate on boring things like delivery, who knows?
Well, let's move on now to the front page of the Mail, which is talking about these Middle East regional tensions, the potential for spillover. What do you make of this?
Well, they have a very, alarming headline, as it were, that's setting up Israel for a war against Iran, and they have an interview with, I think it's Nir Bakat, the economy minister. He is basically warning Iran here: if you send Hezbollah, your proxy, from Lebanon into northern Israel, spreading the war, then we'll strike back at you. So it's a sort of deterrent comment, but I think it does very much underline the potential of the whole conflict to go regional, and underlines Iran's not very hidden primary role. Iran was looking at Israel normalising relations with a lot of Arab countries, and the next big one, we were told, was Saudi Arabia. But by provoking a full-on war between Muslims and Jews, Iran has been able to scupper that, because the feeling in the Muslim world is currently alight against Israel and has knocked that process back. So equally, the West is hoping that Iranian public opinion is beginning to peel away from that regime. So I think that is the real geopolitical game that's afoot.
Really fascinating context there, of course, for the Prime Minister's meetings, not just with the leader of the Palestinian Authority and Benjamin Netanyahu, but also with Saudi Arabian leadership leadership and with Egyptian leadership clearly worried about the wider effects in the region. We will march on forward, though, because tensions also in Britain. On the Telegraph front page today, talking about how police are criticised for allowing Jihad chant at protest. What's the detail here? Well,
it is pretty much thought that, you know, that Hizb ut-Tahrir group, for instance, is proscribed organisation. Hamas, supporting Hamas as a terrorist organisation, should be against the law, and doing it in terms of let's have a jihad to wipe out Israel would seem to be against the UK law. But the Metropolitan Police has put out very wishy-washy statements about this, and what it looks like is simply that they feel they don't, I think, have the physical capacity to impose the law of the land in central London on a Saturday, because there are so many Islamic radicals, you know, far left people supporting the Palestinian cause in unqualified fashion, that really we've lost control of the streets, and we've become a country where effectively Hamas and its supporters can demonstrate, for instance, next to the cenotaph with no comeback. You know, and there's other stories as well. That there's an instance of a tube driver leading chants in favour of Palestine over the tannoy. You know, we talk about a refugee crisis. It seems to me now we're getting to the point where a lot of Jewish British citizens who live in London are feeling, you know, they may be leaving the capital. I would suggest it's got to such either for another country or out into somewhere which feels safer for them. And I think this is highly worrying for the government, the potential for a long ground war or a conflagration to feed into really nasty clashes on the British streets, potential terror plots. That will be clouding Rishi Sunak's kind of horizon, and normally you expect a swing to the governing party, but I think Keir Starmer has positioned Labour very well on this issue. And if we have, for instance, people who've come over on the small boats who then get involved with Islamist activities, I think the buck stops there with the Conservative Party.
Yeah, really interesting how Labour seemed to have neutralised its potential pitfalls there, with a number of people quitting the Labour Party in protest of Starmer's stance on Israel. I should think that Keir Starmer's probably quite happy that those people are quitting.
Yes, music to his ears.
Should we jump across to Tory turmoil and The Observer, which has a story buried on page 15 about the Chancellor of the Exchequer. What's this about?
Yes, so the political editor of The Observer, Toby Helm, has got a story suggesting Jeremy Hunt will not fight the next general election. Now, you would expect that story to be on page 1 or 2, but it's on page 15. Go into the detail. The sourcing is probably not the strongest that I've ever seen, and there's a lot in the story which coincides with the Liberal Democrats having adopted their candidate, and it's slightly got the whiff for me of a classic Lib Dem dirty tricks campaign. Now, it's not to say that Jeremy Hunt might not drop out at the 11th hour,
but I think this story is coming about now. We have not long left, but we should reflect on England's greatest, perhaps best reflected on the front page of The Sun today. Sir Bobby was such a hero to so many people, and this really does feel like the end of an era.
It absolutely does. You know, in the 1960s, England was known around the world for the Beatles and Bobby Charlton. Bobby's gone, an incredibly modest, brilliant person who didn't see the need to go on about himself. You know, he wasn't covering himself in tattoos like modern footballers. He wasn't kind of having scandals around wags. He was just a thoroughly decent human being and magnificent footballer.
Well, no, excellent words to end on there, I suppose. Patrick O'Flynn, thank you so much for talking us through the papers this morning.